All right. Like I just mentioned earlier when I was in the other room, this is an unscheduled day, so I'm going to do an exam review, which means I'm going to answer your specific questions about the 3 study guides that I'm going to use to write the exam. And again, because I'm recording, I'll remind everybody the exam is going to be online. And it'll be on Monday, so it'll be at 8 a.m. It'll show up online on Google Classroom. So what you'll need to do at 8 a.m. on Monday, you don't need to come in. Actually, don't come in because there's no need to. You don't even need to get online like Tutor and Midkiff and Reed. You guys are online right now, for example. You don't need to even do this. I will be online like this just in case anybody has questions, but no one else will be required to be online. So anyway, you'll log in 8 a.m. exam. Again, keep an eye on your email because once the exam posts, you'll get an email that says, hey, there's a new assignment. And you'll see it in your email and you can open it from there. I plan to open it a little early. So you can start it as early as you want. As soon as you see that exam is posted, you can start it. The only catch, if you want to call it that, the only catch is you have to be done by 8:50 and there's nothing that closes it automatically. So it's up to you. You have to stop. You have to hit the submit button before 8:50 a.m. So you'll lose 10 points for every minute you're late. So in other words, if you're 10 minutes late, you're going to lose, you'll just get a 0, right? Because 10 times 10 is 100. The whole thing is worth 100 points. So, don't be late turning it in. What else to tell you? Before I actually get into the study guide portion. So for those of you who haven't done this study guide, I really recommend it. At the very least, not just to help prepare you for the questions on the exam, but to see how the exam looks, because that's exactly how it's going to work. You go on there, you do the multiple choice. It looks the same, right? The study guide and the exams are going to be basically the same as far as the technology is concerned. So if you haven't done the study guides, I highly recommend doing them. What else to tell you? I wait for people to show up. Again, I'll be online, but you don't have to be. If you have any problems with your exam, be ready to take as much pictures or videos or screenshots as possible. Give me some evidence. So if something goes wrong, take pictures, take screenshots, and then send me an email right away. If you send me an email at 8:40, 10 minutes before it's due and say, my computer's not working, and that's it. Like, I can't just take your word for it. So you need some kind of proof, you know how it is. And again, this is one of the reasons I'll be online. So if you do have issues, you could do something like this. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm clicking at the bottom of my screen. There's a little present button, and you can present, you can present a screen, and that's exactly what you could do. So if you're having problems, you could just present your screen, and then I could see it, and that would be proof for me that there's an issue. So anyway, before I get into the actual questions on the study guides, does anybody have just questions in general about how the exam is going to work? All right, that makes it pretty.
We don't.
Okay, good. And my next question was, could someone confirm that they can hear me? And that worked. Okay, so good. All right, let me check something else before we get started too. Let me see. Fall classwork. So again, I'm doing today's study guide until 8:50, which is at this point not that much time. So we probably won't get through all the questions, but I've done this before. I've done study guides before, exam reviews, and I have them recorded, and I'm going to share those videos with you. So I highly recommend watching those videos, those exam review videos, once I post them. I think that's it before I jump into it. Let me think. Exam, don't show up Monday, starts at 8, closes at 8:50. Oh yeah, another thing is, you have exactly 50 minutes to take 50 questions or to answer 50 questions. This is supposed to be a closed book exam, right? You're not supposed to look things up. You're not supposed to use the book or your internet or your friends. And because of that, that's one of the reasons it's timed, right? Because you don't have time to look up all 50 questions. So that being said, if you want more time to take the exam, you should contact me today and say, hey, I want more time. Because if we can arrange a meeting like with the way we're meeting right now, and then I can make sure that you are taking a closed book exam, and I can see your screen, and I can see you, and I can hear you, and if I know all that, then I can pretty much eliminate the time limit. Like, I don't care how long it takes you to take the exam, as long as I know you're not looking stuff up. So keep that in mind too. Also keep in mind, Monday is the latest you can take the exam. If you want to take it earlier for some reason, you have that option. And then finally, the last announcement for the exam before we get through into things is, if for some reason the computer part freaks you out and you just want an old-fashioned paper exams, let me know sometime, before the end of the week. That way I know to print one out and I know to physically be here on Monday to meet you and give you a physical copy of the exam to take. So that's it for exam overviews without the actual questions. Are there any questions about the exam? All right. So I guess the last thing to say before we jump into it, given the technology issues we just had, be prepared on Friday almost to do the same thing. So we're still going to meet in the same room on Friday. But what's going to happen is if we have the same issues, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stay right there behind the podium, even though I know you guys can't see, and I'm going to get on and I'm just going to do my presentation online. So if you're in person, you won't be able to see it. So what I'm saying is either you might consider coming in online on Friday, or at least bring your computer to class on Friday, because even though we'll be face-to-face, you won't be able to see the PowerPoint presentation. So I hate to do this. This is out of my control. Hopefully we'll have the technology fixed before then. But woo! All right. Any questions before we get into the study guides? All right. And I'm going to rush through this because it's being recorded and because we're short on time. So, I want to get as much done as I can, but also, it doesn't matter that I'm rushing it because you guys can always refer back to the video. Let's see. Password. There we go. Can someone please confirm that you can see my screen? Looks like Google Classroom.
We can see it.
Okay. So let's start with the first chapter 1 study guide. Does anybody have any specific questions that you did and you want me to clarify from chapter 1 study guide? All right. Anybody have any specific questions from the chapters 2 study guide that you did and you want me to clarify? All right.
Can we just go over as many questions as possible?
That's my plan. Yep. I just wanted to make sure, because a handful of you have done the study guide. So I just wanted to make sure that for those of you who did do it and got some wrong, I wanted to make sure I covered the questions you may have wanted, because even had we started at 8:50, that wouldn't have been enough time to do everything. But all right, let's do it. Let me temporarily stop sharing my screen. I got to pull this up and make sure you guys can't see each other's grades. There we go. All right, so let me put this in order. Responses, there we go. So obviously when you do the study guide, it's shuffled. So that'll make it a little bit trickier, but again, that's the advantage of recording it. So here we go. Let's try this again. Chapter 1 study guide. And at this point, because I'm about to give you all the answers, had you done the study guide previously, it would have been worth a maximum of 2 points. If you haven't done it yet, now the most you can get is 1 point, because I'm about to give you all the answers for the most part, or at least a good bit of the answers. So anyway, number 1, that's not going to be on there. Number 2, what is biology? Yes, that'll probably be on there. The most common wrong answer is the study of life. Oh, it's not even on there. But anyway, my good grief. Looks like someone's trying to come in. Does anybody have a question? I heard a noise. Nope, someone just left the meeting. Okay, anyway, biology is the scientific study of life. And on the exam, probably one of the other wrong answers is going to be the study of life. So don't choose the study of life, even though you've been taught that your whole life, because remember, we talked a lot about the fact that it's the scientific study of life. Someone raised a hand. Did you have a question, Asbury? All right. Let's keep moving then. So anyway, yes, number 2, that'll probably be on there. Biology is the scientific study of life. Which function is not a property of life? I'm not specifically probably going to ask you this question, but I'll probably give you some scenario like, hey, I found this thing and I was wondering if it was alive. It does this, this, and this. Which one of these is not a property of life? So populations of organisms rarely change over time. That's incorrect, right? Because life evolves. And basically that's what that's saying. So that's not the correct answer. Living things exhibit complex but ordered organization. That is correct. That's the first property of life that I gave you. Organisms take in energy and use it to perform all of life's activities. No, that is also a property of life. And here organisms reproduce with their own kind. Is also correct. Oh, excuse me. See, I'm in a rush here. Sorry. This is the correct answer, right? Because populations of organisms rarely change over time. That's what makes this not a property of life, is that word rarely. So on the exam, for example, I might change that into a correct answer by saying populations of organisms do change over time. And I might change this to say living things do not exhibit complex but ordered organization, in which case that would be the correct answer. Does that make sense to everybody? The way this is written, A is the correct answer, but obviously I'm going to reword it for the exam. All right, number 4 is about ecosystems. We're going to dive deeper into that later in the semester, so that won't be on the exam. Same thing with number 5. We're going to, it's about ecosystems, so will not be on this first exam. I might ask this: which structure can perform all the activities required for life? And that's cells. And even though we haven't really gotten into it, the way you can know that it's cells is because organelles make up cells, and DNA molecules are part of cells, and nuclei are part of cells, right? So all these things are parts of cells. So hopefully that helps you remember. Any questions on that one? All right. Which name is given to the functional compartment of a cell? Oh, that's not going to be on there because we're not getting that deep. What are genes composed of? That'll be later in the semester. We might have some sort of question that's obviously not going to be written just like this, but it's going to be basically you need to be able to pick out some pseudoscience. So let's read this one. A reliable source about the usefulness of an herbal supplement is likely to be recognized by all but one of these characteristics. So choose the exception. Information is the primary source. No, that's a good thing, right? So we want information to be a primary source. That's a good way to find reliable information. It's published in peer-reviewed journal. Again, that's a good thing. Many references are cited. That's good, but let's keep reading. Here we go. The authors are employed by the manufacturer of the supplement. So obviously there's your red flag. That would be the correct answer because, if there's obviously a conflict of interest. Obviously, if I were going to have this question on the exam, I would reword it. It might not be about herbal supplements. The choices would be different. So, for example, the correct answer might say, all the evidence is anecdotal evidence, like we talked about. That's a red flag for pseudoscience. So basically what I'm saying is for this question, understand the red flags for pseudoscience. Any questions about that? Okay, Darwin we'll talk about later in the semester. Natural selection, again, later in the semester. Adaptation, later in the semester. Artificial selection, later in the section, in the semester. Here we go. This one very well might be on the exam. Basically it's saying, what is science? And it is this. It is the inquiry-based effort to describe and explain nature. The search for truth, that's too subjective, right? What is truth? That's not very hard science, so that's why that's not correct. Now, science does often utilize an organized set of principles for how to behave ethically and morally, but that in itself is not science. They did a lot. You could do a lot of unethical and immoral science, but technically it's science if you're following that scientific process. And of course, because B and C are not correct, obviously D is not correct either. So any questions about what science is? That's very likely to be on the exam. Over a span of 2 decades, note that's another evolution, natural selection question. That'll be later in the semester. Here we go. This one might be on there. Which of these statements is correct? Scientific ideas are subjected to repeated testing. That is correct. That is the correct answer as that is written. Of course, for the exam, I could change that to say scientific ideas are rarely subjected to repeated testing, or not suggested, right? In that case, that would not be a correct statement. Speaking of which, talk about these real quick. Science can be used to prove or disprove the idea that deities or spirits cause earthquakes, and I talked about that in the very first lecture. Science and religion, they don't mix in a way, right? You can't prove or disprove religion with science. Science does not require observations that other people can confirm. That's an incorrect statement. So again, for the exam, I could change this one to be correct by saying science does require observations that other people can confirm. And then finally, only exploratory science can lead to important conclusions about nature. That's just not true. There's all kinds of different science. So anyway, any questions about number 16? 17, which statement is a valid scientific hypothesis? This is a good one. obviously it's not going to be written just like this, but it's very important that you understand what the hypothesis is. Human history is determined by a series of supernatural events. No, that's not a valid scientific hypothesis because we can't test that, because that whole supernatural word, right? We can't test supernatural stuff. Again, the whole science and religion thing. Humans should help in the conservation of other animal species. I agree with that statement, but that's not a valid scientific hypothesis. How do you test that? What's the data, right? Moving forward, humans are controlled by forces beyond our understanding. This is basically like A, no, we can't test that scientifically. Therefore, that's not a valid scientific hypothesis. Human and bacteria share a common genetic code. That is a valid scientific hypothesis. I'm not saying well, it is correct too, but anyway, don't confuse the word valid for correct, right? The hypothesis can be incorrect, but it needs to be valid scientific, and in that it has to be testable, right? And we can test this. We can look at a human genome, we can look at a bacteria genome, and we can see if they have a common genetic code or not. So that's what makes that a valid scientific hypothesis. And on the exam, obviously, if I were to give you this question, it wouldn't be this, but you look for something that's testable. Anyway, any questions about 17? 18, there will almost definitely be some version of this. Obviously, it's not going to be about a car, but you definitely need to be I would give you this kind of example, and you need to pick out what the prediction is, what the observation is, what the question is, what the hypothesis is. So anyway, you try to start your car, but it does not start. Which of these is a prediction? My car's battery is dead? No, that's the observation, right? You've observed that the batteries die. If I recharge the battery, then my car will start. That is correct. That is a prediction, because usually we do an if-then statement. And basically, the prediction describes how you're going to test the hypothesis, right? So if your observation is my car's battery is dead, then your hypothesis could be, good grief. Luckily, I didn't mislead you with the prediction, but again, I'm rushing, so I kind of misled you with some other stuff. So let me back up. You try to start your car, but it does not start. Which of these is a prediction, right? So the fact that it does not start would be the observation, right? That's your observation. And then you come to your question. What is wrong with my car, right? And then you would come up with a hypothesis or multiple hypotheses. And one hypothesis could be that my car's battery is dead. Then you come up with a prediction that basically puts in words how you're going to test your hypothesis. So if your hypothesis is that my car's battery is dead, then your prediction is if I recharge the battery, then my car will start. So anyway, that's what a prediction is. Remember, it's an if-then statement that basically describes how you're going to test your hypothesis. And the reason this is a completely wrong answer is because my car is too old to function properly. That's almost a hypothesis because it is an answer to the question, but it's not testable. We can't, how do you test too old, right? There's more specific hypotheses, like the battery's dead. So the battery might be too old, for example. But anyway, any questions about number 18? On that note, number 19, this is another thing you need to know. Again, you need to know what a hypothesis is. So look at some of the options. A proposed explanation for a set of observations. That's correct. Let's see if it's the most correct. A guess made in order to determine what observations and explorations are necessary. That's incorrect because you're kind of going reverse scientific method. Observations made in order to determine a theory. No, an observation is an observation, right? That's the first step. Hypothesis comes later. And a theory determined after data collection. That's wrong for two reasons. One, a theory is not a hypothesis. Those aren't the same. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And it's not done after the data collection, right? So you form your hypothesis, then you do an experiment and collect data, generally speaking. So anyway, yes, the best answer for this is a proposed explanation for a set of observations. And of course, it would be even better if it said something like, it's testable, right, and falsifiable. And that might be included too on the exam. So any questions about number 19, what a hypothesis is? All right, again, like I've said before, you need to know the order of the scientific method. Let's see, these both start with exploration. So it could be either one of these, exploration / observation is how it should be written. Then hypothesis, then prediction, then experiment. So that is a correct order. Let's see what we have here. Exploration, question. Oh, this is incorrect because of opinion and because conclusion comes before hypothesis. So the proper answer is C. Now notice too, that doesn't have all the steps. It just has some of them in order because this doesn't say which ones it doesn't ask if for all the steps. It just says which ones are in order. And the question on the exam will probably be the same way. So it won't be these exact words, but whichever words they are, they will be from the scientific method, and they will be in order. So any questions about number 20? All right. 21, how are hypotheses different than theories? This is important. Theories are more comprehensive than hypotheses. That is a correct statement. Let's keep moving. Make sure there's no, because when you're doing this, make sure you choose the most correct statement, not just a correct statement. Theories must be testable. Hypotheses aren't. That's not true. They both have to be testable. Hypotheses are educated guesses. Theories are tentative explanations. No, 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 no. This is the most wrong. This is the question that most people guess wrong, because their whole life they've been hearing hypotheses are educated guesses, and that's not 100% correct, but that's what throws people off, right? Whoops. So hypotheses are not educated guesses necessarily, and theories definitely are not tentative explanations. So hypotheses are tentative explanations. Anyway, hypotheses are derived from experimentation, whereas theories derive from observation. That is not true. I'd talk more about that, but we're kind of in a rush. So yes, the most correct answer is theories are more comprehensive than hypotheses. So think about all the different ways I could reword that one sentence. Hypotheses are less comprehensive than theories. Theories are broader in scope than hypotheses. Hypotheses are narrower in scope than theories, right? So remember, theories are bigger and they're more tested. All those things in your textbook. Your textbook. Any questions about number 21? All right. Excuse me. Antibiotic resistance evolves in bacteria when, we'll talk about that later in the semester. What's information flow? That won't be on the exam. That won't be on the exam. Which results occur climate change? That will be later in the semester. And none of these questions, these are great questions to get you thinking scientifically, but we don't have time for 50 minutes for you to read this whole introduction and then answer a bunch of questions about that. So those questions will not be on there. But if you have questions about those, meet me later and I can go over them with you. But because they won't be on the exam, I'm going to skip it and go straight to the Chapter 2 study guide, if no one has any more questions about the Chapter 1 study guide. All right, we're making decent time. Chapter 2 study guide. Here we go. Obviously, again, when you take it, when you do it, it's shuffled. I'm going to put it in order, in the correct order. We're not going to ask anything about radiation. I'm probably not going to ask you to name an element out of a list of things, but hopefully you should know by now that nitrogen is an element because we've talked so much about it, and it is one of the big four, and you had to learn about it in lab. And you should definitely know that glucose is a molecule because we talked about that. You should know that salt is an ionic compound because we talked about that. And you should know that water is a molecule because we talked about that. So again, I probably won't ask this question, but if I do, it will include a list of things that you are familiar with, right? So you should know that nitrogen is an element. You should know what water, glucose, and salt is. Any questions about number 2? All right. Number 3 basically asks, what are the big four? And I told you need to know this, so this will definitely be on the exam. I'm not sure exactly how it'll be written, but the correct answer is carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen. The big four, all those things you had to draw in lab. Any questions about number 3? Number 4, which of the following elements is a trace element that is essential for life? No, I told you did not have to know the trace elements, so let's just move forward since we're short on time. In order to have a positive charge, an atom must have what? And there's the correct answer. It has to have more protons than electrons. But think about how I could reword that. So the correct answer I could put, it must have fewer electrons than protons, right? That would also be a correct answer. And also the question, if I put it on the exam, might not say positive charge. It might ask you about a negative charge, or it might ask you about a neutral charge. So just remember, if it has more protons than electrons, it's positive. If it has more electrons than protons, it's negative. If they're equal, then it's neutral. So any questions about number 5? Number 6, all atoms of an element have the same number of what? Basically, that's saying elements, all atoms of an element are defined by what? And then remember, the number is protons, right? So anything that has one proton is a hydrogen. Anything that has 2 protons is a helium, right? They're defined by the number of protons. So any questions about number 6? Number 7 is also really simple. What's found in the nucleus of an atom, and you need to know the electrons on the outside, everything else is on the inside. So the answer is neutrons and protons. Any questions about number 7? Number 8, I'm not going to ask you specifically about beryllium, but you will probably get a question like this that has some basic math. So let's look at it. Its atomic mass is 9. So to remind you what this means, because you need to know what this means, that means its protons plus its neutrons, if you add them up, equals 9. That's all we know, right? So far. Its atomic number is 4. So that should tell you that its proton, right? Its atomic number tells you how many protons it has, right? So it has 4 protons. So how many protons are found in beryllium atom? Well, the answer happens to be right there because the atomic number equals the number of protons. So the correct answer to this is 4. But this could become a math question if this were to say its atomic mass is 9, its atomic number is 4. How many neutrons are found in a beryllium atom? In which case it would be, 4 plus what equals 9, right? So 4 protons plus how many neutrons equals 9. And the answer in that case would be 5. 4 plus 5 equals 9. So you will get a basic question like this. I might ask about the protons. I might ask about the neutrons. We shall see. And it probably won't be about beryllium. So any questions about number 8? All right, here's another similar one where it requires a little bit of basic math. An uncharged atom of mercury. So uncharged atom, that tells us that the number of protons also equals the number of electrons because it's not positive or it's not negative. It is neutral. It's uncharged. Of mercury has an atomic number of 80. So there we go. It has 80 protons. We know that. An atomic mass of 200. This atom, the atom has, so we know 80 protons, right? Because its atomic mass is 80. Its atomic number is 80. We also know it has 80 electrons because we just said it's uncharged. So how many protons it has, that's how many electrons it has. Now we need to figure out how many neutrons it has. And the question here is 80 plus what equals 200, right? And it's 80 plus 120, right? 80 plus 120 equals 200. So A is the correct answer. You might get a question like this. I would definitely change. It won't be mercury. It will be uncharged. And I will give you all the information that's needed to figure this out when you get it on the exam. So any questions about number 9? All right, really quickly, can someone still confirm that you can hear me before I keep moving? I hope I'm not talking to myself.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Because it's happened before. I've done like a whole lecture, and then turns out it stopped recording. But anyway, the way the Earth moves around the sun, I don't like this question. It's the way it's taught. It's the way electrons move around the nucleus, but I don't really like that because they don't necessarily orbit. I don't have time to get into it. So anyway, number 10 probably will not. It won't be on the exam. Isotopes of an element have the same number of blank and different number of blank. So all atoms, right, of an element all have the same number of protons. So we know the first word must be protons. So yes, and we know it's A or B, but they have a different number of what? And the answer is neutrons. So I've said it before a few times. I'll say it again. If you change the number of protons, you change the element. If you change the number of neutrons, like we're talking about now, then you get an isotope. If you change the number of electrons, then you get an ion. And we'll talk about that later. So make sure you understand those 3 things. Any questions about number 11?
No.
Okay. Hold on, let me check something. All right, sorry. An atom with an electrical charge, like I was just saying, that's an ion, right? If you change the number of electrons, so if you have more protons or fewer protons or electrons, then it's going to be charged. That's an ion. So any questions about number 12? All right. I'm not going to ask you anything about radioactive stuff. The bond between oppositely charged ions, it's in the name. That's an ionic bond. Here's something I haven't told you yet. A lot of times in my exams, you can almost get half credit as long as you don't answer the dumb question. So this question, for example, might be worth 2 points. And if you answer it correctly, which is ionic, it would be worth 2 points. However, if you answered hydrogen or covalent, you might get 1 point because at least those are bonds. Because polar, there is no such thing as a polar bond. There are polar molecules, but there is no such thing as a polar bond. So again, when you take this exam, you might get partial credit for not answering and not choosing the dumbest answer, if that makes sense. Anyway, here's an interesting one because I never taught you this. Considering not specifically, consider the following reaction. What type of bond is this? And I've never taught you this reaction, but what you should see here that gives it away is the fact that this is a plus, right? That's a K plus. That's a Br minus. Those are obviously ions. Therefore, it's an ionic bond. So any questions about number 15? All right. What name is given to bonds that involve sharing of electrons? You definitely need to know that. It's covalent. Because remember, like sharing. Like if you cohabitate with somebody, you share a house. If you co-parent, then you're divorced parents that are sharing the responsibility of parenting. And again, there is no such thing as a polar bond. So this is being one of those other questions where as long you get 2 points for getting it correct, 1 point for not choosing the stupid answer, and 0 points for doing the stupid answer. So really, I highly recommend studying this, even if you feel like it's hopeless and you feel like, I'm not going to get it. You might not get it, but at least study enough to where you know dumb answers when you see them. Anyway, sulfur has an atomic number of 16. How many covalent bonds can it form? That takes a little bit of time to figure it out, so I might not ask it, but think about it. It has an atomic number of 16. That means it has 16 protons, and since I didn't say anything about it being charged, that means it has 16 electrons. So that's 2 on the inside, then 8 on the outside. That makes up 10, so we still have 6 to deal with. So 6 on the outermost. If it has 6 on the outermost ring, that means it needs 2 more to be filled, which means the answer is 2. And I know I went through that quickly, but this is being recorded, so you can pause it and let it marinate as much as you want. If this question's on the exam, it probably won't be about sulfur. Whatever it is, I'll give you all the numbers that you need to answer it. So any questions about number 17?
No.
All right. The hydrogen and oxygen atoms of a water molecule are held together by what? I told you in the lecture this question was going to be on the exam, and it almost definitely will be. The answer is covalent. Covalent bonds hold together a single molecule of water. This will be one of the most missed questions, and people are going to mostly guess hydrogen when they should say covalent, because hydrogen bonds hold different water molecules, right? So if you have 2 water molecules and they're being attracted to each other, that's because of hydrogen bonds. But if you're looking at a single water molecule, the oxygen being held, holding on to those hydrogens, those are covalent bonds. So that question will be missed, but the answer is covalent. And again, there's the stupid answer. So you get 0 credit for the stupid answer. You probably get partial credit for a semi-correct answer. Likewise, here's the other question that it's going to be missed. So this is talking about 18 is talking about a single water molecule. 19 is asking about, again, multiple water molecules. So what holds this molecule together, water molecule together with the other water molecule? And that answer is hydrogen bonds. So again, those questions I guarantee will be missed. If not more than the other questions, then it'll be top 5. But anyway, any questions about 18 or 19? All right, 20. Why is water considered a polar molecule? This is important. It might be on the exam. Let's look at the options. The oxygen atom is found between the 2 hydrogen atoms. That is a correct statement, and that is part of why it's a polar molecule. But let's keep reading, because you always need to choose the best answer, not just a good answer, but the most correct. Oxygen atom attracts the hydrogen atoms. Also a true statement. Oxygen end of the molecule has a slight negative charge, and the hydrogen end, you can't see it because the way it is right now, but it has a positive charge. That is the most correct answer. What's the other one say? Both hydrogen atoms are at one end of the molecule. The oxygen is at the other. See? So all the other statements are correct statements, but those statements in themselves don't explain why it's a polar molecule. So the most correct answer is C. And there will be some questions like that where, you need to make sure you read it, because there are correct statements. You just have to make sure you choose the most correct. So any questions about number 20? All right. This question we basically asked before. Adjacent water molecules interact through what? The answer is hydrogen bonds, but instead of listing the word hydrogen bonds, basically you need to look for something that describes a hydrogen bond, which is not sharing of electrons, right? That would be a covalent bond. Again, so it wouldn't be C because that's sharing of electrons. Here, so far the 2 only good options are these, because they both involve an electrical attraction. So let's see what this one says. Electrical attraction between the hydrogen of one water molecule and the oxygen of another. That is correct, right? It's an attraction. Yeah, and it's definitely not this. The electrical attraction between the hydrogens of adjacent water molecules. No, it's not like one hydrogen is going to be attracted to the other. Quite the opposite. They're going to repel each other. So the hydrogen of one water molecule and the oxygen of another. So any questions about number 21? Number 22, I didn't teach you that. If you're curious about it, let me know. I'm not going to ask you about it on the exam. When a base is added to a buffered solution, yes, you need to know this. Buffers resist changes in pH. You need to know that. You need to know how it happens. And if you just remember that they resist changes in pH, just remember that they do the opposite. So if you add a base, that means you're adding OH minus ions, right? So a buffer is going to do two things. It's going to absorb OH minus ions, or it's going to donate the opposite, which are H plus ions. So let's see which one of those is correct. Nope, it's not going to donate the OH ions. It's going to accept them. It's not going to accept water molecules. That's the dumbest answer. That would get you 0 credit. Donate, there we go. It's going to donate the H plus ions because, again, it's going to do the opposite. So if you put in a base, which is a bunch of OH minus, it's going to do the opposite, which is donate H plus. And again, for the exam, I will change it. I might change it up. So it might say accept OH minus ions, in which case A would be correct. And this might say donate or accept H plus ions, in which case that would be incorrect. And of course, I might ask you about an acid and not a base. So don't memorize these questions verbatim. Understand the concepts of the questions. So any questions about number 23? Okay, 24. I already told you need to know this. This is one of those few numbers that you need to know. The answer is 70 to 95%. As far as we're concerned, yeah, let's just keep it like that. The question might be shortened just to save you time, and it might say cells are approximately how much water, and the answer is 70 to 95%. So just keep that in mind. I'm not going to try to trick you. If you read cells are approximately how much water, don't think I'm trying to trick you and think, like, was he talking about human cells or monkey cells? Right, don't worry about that. So if you're shorthanding, cells are equal to 70 to 95% water. Any questions about 24? Which of the following is an acid? I didn't teach you that.
Hey.
Yes.
So we got about 5 minutes left. Is there any chance we can skim through 3 at all to be able to make sure, we can get at least an understanding of what's going on?
What I'll do is I'll keep going through number 2, and then I'll stay on after 8:50, and everybody else can stay on as late as you want. But I know you guys, your class ends at 8:50. I'm here for you, so I'll keep going after 8:50, but you guys don't have to. So yes, I will get to chapter 3. The question is, will you guys? And if you do have to leave at 8:50, again, this is being recorded, so you can watch the video later. What are the reactants? You need to know this. Remember, products are on the left, reactants are on the right, at least in this course. Excuse me. Good grief. Reactants are on the left, products are on the right. In this class, the arrow is always pointing towards the products. So what are the reactants? These are the reactants. So you just choose whichever one of those is correct. And it looks like that is B. Any questions about number 27? All right. I'm not going to ask you about insects being able to walk on water. As water freezes, yes, you need to know this. What happens when water freezes? Its molecules move further apart. I could also say it becomes less dense, right? Because that's the same thing. Its water molecules move it apart. That makes it less dense. I could also say it floats, because that's what happens when it becomes less dense, when its molecules move further apart. So that's the answer. Yeah. 30, sugar dissolves. There we go. So remember, solute, solvent, solution. Solvent dissolves the solute and makes a solution. So in this case, the coffee is the solvent, sugar is the solute, and the sweetened coffee is the solution. So solvent, solute, solution. If you get that question, obviously I might change up the words. It might not be about sugar and coffee. And also it might not be in that order where it's, solvent, solute, solution. So again, don't memorize the exact words, memorize or understand the concept. A base, what's a base do? Yes, you need to know what a base does. And the answer is it removes H plus ions from a solution. Another thing a base does is it adds OH minus ions to a solution, right? So right now, as it's written, D is the correct answer, but I could reword it to make it say adds OH minus ions to a solution, in which case that would be the correct answer. Or I might say increases the pH of a solution, in which case that would be the correct answer. Any questions about 31? 32, all the following are potential negative impacts of ocean acidification except one. We're not going to talk about that. Here we go. You definitely need to know this. Relative to a pH of 7, a pH of 4 has what? And I talked about this when I introduced it in lecture. You need to know each step is a times 10. And you need to know going up is basic, going down is acidic. So if we're going from 7 to 4, that means we're getting more acidic, right? So 7 to 6 is 10. And then 6 to 5 is 100. And then 5 to 4 is 1,000, right? So each time you multiply by 10. So it's 1,000 times. So I know right without even looking at the words, I know this is the only one that has 1,000. So that's the correct answer. But think about all the different ways I could reword this. 1,000 times lower OH minus concentrations, 1,000 times higher acidity, 1,000 times lower basic. All the different ways I could reword it. We have less than a minute left. Again, I'm going to stay on. But for those of you who have to get off, go ahead. When I'm done recording this, I'll post it. And here's the hint for those of you who stayed. I'm going to post the videos from previous semesters. And in those videos, there's a really important information, because in the exam, there's going to be a question that makes no sense. And there's going to be options that make no sense. Because it might say, like, how many times does a banana have sex on Christmas? Right? And then the answer might be something like Buffalo Wild Wings. So if you watch those videos, the other ones that I'm going to post from previous semesters, the answer to that really wonky question will be given to you in that video. And if you get that question correct, it's a 10% boost to your exam. So if you score 100%, then you're going to have 110. You know, if you get a 60, then you're going to have a 66, so on and so forth. So please watch that video when I post it, because that's going to give you a 10% boost. All you have to do is write down the answer to the question that makes no sense. And then when you get the question that makes no sense on the exam, you will know the answer. Anyway, any questions? Because it's 8:51. If you have to go, you go ahead and go, but I'm going to go ahead and stay here and keep recording. What name is given to a substance that resists the changes in pH? You already know that. It's buffers. I will definitely ask a question about buffers, either that one or some of the other ones I've already presented. What is the outcome of evaporative cooling in form of sweating? I probably won't ask that, but obviously you're just going to get cooler, right? It's going to decrease your body temperature. That's the purpose of sweating. Radiometric dating we don't talk about. An atom has 20 protons, 20 neutrons, 20 electrons. What atom is being described? All this, the neutrons and electrons, that's just to throw you off. What you need to focus on is the number of protons. So the answer is calcium, right? Because calcium has atomic number of 20, which means that's 20 protons. Obviously, if you get that question in the exam, it won't be about calcium. It'll be some other element, but the information will be provided. Any questions about number 39? All right, we don't ask about the iodines. Okay, we don't ask about that. pH scale. Examine the pH scale below. How does apple juice compare to lemon juice? This is just like the question you saw before. I was like, we go from a 7 to a 4. It's the same thing, except now you just have to look at it and say apple juice is apple juice, lemon juice. So we're going from 3 to 2. So that means we know apple juice is 10 times more basic than lemon juice. We know lemon juice is 10 times more acidic than apple juice. We know that apple juice has 10 times more OH minus ions, or 10 times fewer H plus ions. We know lemon juice has 10 times more H plus ions, or 10 times fewer OH minus ions. So again, when you're thinking about the pH, think about all the different ways I could add, all the different ways I could describe the same situation, because that's the way the exam is going to go. Anyway, how does it compare? The only options that have 10 are these two, so I can go ahead and eliminate the other. Lemon juice has 10 times higher H plus concentration. That is correct. Lemon juice is 10 times more acidic than apple juice. We can see that right here. Therefore, it has 10 times higher H plus concentration. Any questions about 41? All right. Again, you don't have time to read all these questions or read this long thing and then answer the question. So that won't be on the exam. So we're going to go to chapter 3 unless somebody has questions about the chapter 2 study guide. All right. Let's get into chapter 3, study guide. Okay, make sure you can still see. That's good. Let's put this in order. The last one. People with lactose. I'm not going to ask about lactose. Here we go. This is one of the few things, right? You don't necessarily, you didn't need to memorize how many times everything can bond, but you at least need to know how many times carbon can bond because it's all about the carbon. So a single carbon atom can form a maximum of 4 covalent bonds. And again, I'll probably just shorten that to say how many times can carbon bond? The answer is 4. So any questions about that? All right. This one won't be on there, I don't think, but because I didn't teach you. But look, here we just have a bunch of carbons, and hydrogens. And not that I taught you that, but that is an organic compound. Just because it has a bunch of carbons, right? Anyway, you definitely don't need to know about different groups. I'm going to keep moving. I'm not going to ask you about that. In the following reaction, galactose is a blank. So we have galactose plus glucose equals lactose plus water. Oh, here we go. This is kind of an important question. You won't get it exactly as written, but you should be able to get this. And you will probably get some version of this with some other words that you might not recognize, but that's okay because here's what you need to look for. We see that we put 2 things together, and then there's a water molecule in the products. So the fact that we put 2 things together and there's a water molecule in the products, that means we put them together. So it's a dehydration reaction. Again, because the water is in the product side of the reaction, we know it's a dehydration reaction, and dehydration reactions bring things together. Therefore, you should be able to know then that galactose is a monomer, right? Because we put 2 monomers together. Though I've got to be honest, there's some flaws in that question that I don't like that I don't have time to get into. So if you do get a question like that, it'll be more specific. So if you're really on top of your game and you're seeing what I'm seeing, don't worry, that'll get fixed in the exam and be more specific and less ambiguous. But anyway, number 6. What name is given to this reaction? Again, here we go. Something plus something gives us something plus water. The fact that it produced water makes it a dehydration reaction because we basically squeezed, you could say we squeezed water out of the reactants and produced some water. So any questions about number 6? I'm sure this question is going to come up later in the study guide, but just in case, obviously if the question on the exam said something plus water gives us something plus something, right? If the water is on the reactant side of the equation, right? If it was on this side of the equation, then you would say that's a hydrolysis reaction. So any questions about number 6? All right, this is a question on your pre-lab from this week. Carbohydrates typically include what? Carbon, hydrogens, and oxygens. As a matter of fact, you needed to know more in the lab, right? The 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. But anyway, for the exam, if it's on there, that's what you would need to know. Any questions about number 7? Number 8, which name is given to the following reaction? Yep, again, doesn't matter what the words are. Don't worry about the other words. Here you go. Water on the reactant side, right? Water on the left-hand side of the equation. That makes it hydrolysis. Because when you get this question, if you get it, there probably will be words you don't understand. So just focus in on that water. Is the water a reactant or is the water a product? So if it's a reactant, it's hydrolysis. If it's a product, it's dehydration. No, you don't need to know. This was just an example. I told you that glucose and fructose are isomers, but I also told you didn't need to know that example of isomers, so that question will not be on the exam. Complete the equation. Monosaccharide plus monosaccharide gives you what? And obviously water. Basically, that's saying 1 plus 1 equals what? And the answer is 2, right? Disaccharide. So the answer number 10 is disaccharide. Any questions about that? What can you conclude about the following reaction? Galactose plus glucose equals lactose plus water. All right. Glucose and lactose are both disaccharides. Obviously not. Well, I should say that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip it for reasons I don't have time to get into, but this question will not be on the exam. Table sugar. I might ask you this because I did say in the lecture I'm not going to ask you to know examples of it, but if I did, the one that you should know is table sugar because it's so prevalent in our life. And table sugar is sucrose, and that is a disaccharide. So there's not much else to say about that, except just memorize that just in case. Any questions about that? All right. A protein's function is dependent on it, and environmental factors such as pH and temperature. What property of the protein itself dictates the protein's functions? I said this so many times. It's so important. It's going to be important throughout the semester. It's shape. It's all about the shape, not the length, not the size, not the weight. It's all about the shape. So any questions about number 13? All right. 14, for good health, it's important to include what in our diets? I'm not going to ask about that. Which molecule is an example of a polysaccharide? Yes, you do need to recognize a polysaccharide when you see one in a list. And you know starch is one of the ones I taught you. I taught you about starch. I taught you about glycogen. And I taught you about cellulose. So this answer, if you were to get it, could be starch, could be glycogen, could be cellulose. Anyway, any questions about number 15?
I got a question overall real quick. How many questions is the test overall?
I'm shooting for 50.
Gotcha.
Give or take. So it'll be very close to 50. Oh, yeah. Speaking of which, that reminds me. Almost all the questions, obviously, are going to come from these study guides. There might be one or two that come from the syllabus. Because if you guys remember way back when, I told you your first assignment was to read the syllabus. At least my part of the syllabus, right? Not the whole Title IX and the stuff that you get in everybody else's syllabus. But my part of the syllabus, make sure you read it. So I'm glad you asked that question. Plants use what to store energy? Plants use which molecule as an energy storing carbohydrate? You also need to know this. Remember, starch. We said you should associate starch with plants storing energy. So any questions about that? All right. If I were to change this question to say animals use which molecule as an energy storing carbohydrate, then the answer would be glycogen. Anyway, cellulose is an example of what? Like I already said earlier, it's an example of a polysaccharide. That's just something you need to know. That's one of the 3 polysaccharides that I taught you. Any questions about that? Which substance is hydrophilic? I might ask you about this or not. I only told you once, but which of these loves water? And the answer is cellulose. Here's something. Here's more important though. It's not like you need to memorize the fact that cellulose is hydrophilic, but, and this is good test taking advice for any exam for any subject. Sometimes if you don't know the answer, look for the thing that, like, one of these things is not like the other. So testosterone, lipid; butter, lipid; cholesterol, lipid, right? This is the one thing that's not a lipid. So even if you couldn't remember that cellulose is hydrophilic, just, that's the one thing that's different. So any questions about number 18? Likewise too, sorry, if this were going to be on the exam, I'd probably reword it to say which of these is hydrophobic, and give you a bunch of different options. And only one of them would be a lipid, and the other ones would be, probably polysaccharides. Number 19. It's too long, so I'm just not going to waste your time putting a long question on the exam because you only have 50 minutes to answer 50 questions, which I'm not going to ask about health stuff. Here we go. You do need to know what makes up stuff, right? So what a fat contains which molecular components? And the answer is, there we go, 3 fatty acids and a glycerol molecule. And there's not much else to say about that. So any questions about number 21? Which name is given to the following reaction? So we have something plus something gives us something, and water. Oh, there we go. Since water is on the right-hand side of the reaction, since water is a product, then the answer is dehydration. So basically that question's already been asked, just using different words. Any questions about 22? All right, here's an important one you need to know. Saturated fats are saturated with what? Hydrogen. Because remember, saturated fats are flat, and that's what makes them so unhealthy, right? Because they stick together. That's what helps clog your arteries, because they stick together so nicely. And they stick together so nicely because they're flat, and they're flat because they don't have any kinks. There's little curves and turns, and they don't have any curves or turns because they don't have any double bonds, and they don't have any double bonds because they are saturated with hydrogen. They have all the hydrogens they can fit. So any questions about 23? All right. By definition, what type of fatty acid had double bonds? So it's a good complementary question to that last one. If it has double bonds, it's unsaturated, because if it has double bonds, that means it doesn't have all the hydrogens that it could have, which means it's not saturated. It's unsaturated. So any questions about 24? 25, I'm not going to ask you about. That's more of a health question. It's good for your everyday life, but it's not going to be on the exam. A fat that is completely hydrogenated. This is a fancier way of just asking what I asked earlier. It's just asking for more details. So if it has all the hydrogens, we know it's saturated, so it's not A or B. And because of that, it's going to usually be solid at room temperature because, like I said, they stack together nicely because those fatty acids are nice and flat. So the answer to that would be C. And of course, for the exam, I might change it to say solid at room temperature and saturated, right? I might flip those around. So again, don't memorize these verbatim. Oh, and again, if you were to guess, I don't know, saturated and liquid at room temperature, you might get half credit because at least you got saturated correct. Or if you were to guess unsaturated, here we go, unsaturated and solid at room temperature, you might get half credit because at least you got the solid part right. Right. So basically, you get full credit for C, probably, or maybe half credit for B or D, and 0 credit because that one's completely wrong. A is completely wrong. Anyway, blank is a steroid. I might ask you this. Estrogen. If I do though, it'll be cholesterol because I told you cholesterol is the most important. That's like the base steroid. So if I ask you anything about, which one of these is a steroid, then it would be probably cholesterol. But again, maybe estrogen, maybe testosterone because those are the 3 we talked about. Any questions about number 27? All right, 28. How does RNA differ from DNA? I might ask this. We're going to have a whole chapter on it, so I'm not sure this is going to be on the first exam. RNA is not double-stranded, so we can keep moving. RNA is a polymer of amino acids, but then again, so is DNA, so we can keep moving. RNA contains uracil, and DNA contains thymine. There we go. That's the correct answer. Any questions about 28? All right. And again, I could reword it. So I could turn this into the correct answer by saying RNA is single-stranded, DNA is double-stranded. So again, don't memorize the exact words. Understand the concepts of these questions. A friend of yours appears to have put on a lot of muscle very quickly. At the same time, you notice that your friend seems to have a lot of mood swings. That's too long. I probably won't put it on there because I don't want to waste your time having to read a bunch of stuff in a timed exam. But basically, anabolic steroids is the answer. Here's an important one. Enzymes are what? So of the 4 big things we talked about, the 4 molecules, you need to know that enzymes are proteins. That'll be very important throughout the semester. So enzymes are proteins. You might get partial credit for amino acids because amino acids are the things that make up proteins, but the answer is proteins. Enzymes are proteins. Any questions about number 30? 31, proteins are polymers of what? Monomers, basically. And the answer is, like I just said, the question above, amino acids, right? Proteins are the polymers, amino acids are the monomers. Any questions about that? What is the name that's given to a reaction that breaks peptide bonds? The whole peptide bond part doesn't even matter. It's just there to throw you off a little bit. The fact is, as far as we're concerned in this semester, any reaction that breaks any bonds, we're just going to call that a hydrolysis reaction. So remember, dehydration reaction brings things together. Hydrolysis reactions break them apart. That's how it works this entire semester. Any questions about that? All right, we're not going to do anything about lactose in this exam. This one's too long. It's a good question, so if you have questions about it, ask me about it later, but it won't be on the exam. Here we go. Nucleic acids are polymers of which monomers? You need to know this, and the answer is nucleotide, right? It's all in the name. Nucleotides are the monomer. Polynucleotides are the polymer. That's what nucleic acids are. So any questions about number 36? 37 won't be on there. Here we go. DNA. This might be on there. It'll definitely be on there on the like 3rd exam of the semester. But DNA is, let's see, T, G, A, and C. There we go. That's the correct answer. Basically, DNA does not have a U. So incorrect because of the U. Incorrect because of the U. Incorrect because of the U. The answer is B. Any questions about number 38? So like I said in the lecture, you can just remember A, T, C, and G. You don't even need to memorize the whole name. And I'm not going to try to trick you. So if you see something with a T, I'm like, is that the T he was talking about or was it something else? Nope, I'm not going to trick you. If it's thymine, it's thymine. If you see something with a T, that's the T I'm talking about. So any questions about that? Again, no questions about lactose intolerance. I'm not going to ask you to do this on this exam. You're going to learn about that later. There we go. That's a good little question. Glucose is the starch, as blank are the proteins. So glucose is the monomer of starch. So then that's basically asking, what are the monomers of proteins? And the answer there is amino acids. And of course, I might change it up. It might say starch is the glucose, as proteins are the blank. In which case, well, I guess the answer would still be the same, but the order in which it's written might be different. So again, don't memorize these verbatim. Understand the concepts. Any questions about number 41? 42, the ability to tolerate lactose through life most likely arose in, no lactose questions. Again, no lactose questions. That question 44 won't be on there either. 45 will be later in the semester. Examine the 3 sugars in the figure, the formula C6H12. All right. This is just a long-winded way of asking you what is an isomer, right? Basically, you should look at this. Hey, they have all the same chemical formula, but a different structure. Hey, that's what an isomer is. There we go. So C, they have the same formula, but different structures. The figure below shows that is let's see, AGTAC. All right, because it has a T, I know it's not RNA. And because there's only one strand, I know it's a single strand. So single strand of DNA is the correct answer. Again, I know it's DNA because it has a T, and I know it's single stranded just because I can see it in the picture. Any questions about that? All right. Not going to ask you anything about oleic acid. I might ask you this. Basically, you should just be able to look at this and say, oh, yeah, there's those 4 rings. That's a steroid. And I told you that in the lecture. I said you should be able to recognize that as a steroid. And that's it. Now we've gone through all the questions that are going to be on that at least might be on the exam, and you know exactly which ones won't be on the exam. So again, I'm going to post this video along with videos I have from previous semesters. Make sure you watch them because, like I said, well, I already said it. I'm not going to repeat it. So make sure you watch them. And for those of you who stayed this long, if you want, go ahead and send me an email and say, hey, I stayed until the end. Oh, there's only 2 of you. Actually, I'll just do it right now since there's only 2 of you. You guys get a little bit of extra credit for staying until the end for your attendance. So any questions?
No, not at the moment. I appreciate it. Do you know when it would be posted for so we can go back and I can physically write it all down?
It takes a while for Google to process it. So I would guess hopefully before lab today. But, the exam's not until Monday, so we have some time. And also, obviously, I rushed through this. So I want to tell everybody watching the video and you two who are live with me now, this is the stuff that we can do anytime. We don't have to wait till an official exam review. You could, like, after you do a study guide, you could say, hey, can you go over this exam review or this study guide with me out, during office hours or any other time, and we can go through it and, get the correct answers and know why your incorrect answers are incorrect and all that stuff. So please take me up on that. All right. So if you guys don't have anything else, I'm going to stop recording and I'm going to, I guess that's it. I'm going to stop recording because technically these are office hours, so I'm not going to get off. All right. Well, you guys have a great day, and I'll either see you in lab or possibly see you on Friday.
Awesome. Have a great day. Oh, could you also give me an email back, perchance, for the editor? We need the information so we can pass it through.
Oh, for the movie?
Yep.
Yep, we'll do.
Awesome. Thank you much.
No problem.